Hello, and welcome back in. We have a special guest today on the channel. We are going to switch gears from Rumi, give him a day off, and move over to a quick reading out of the Bhagavad Gita, also known as just the Gita. This is, if you're not familiar with it, probably the premier book in Indian spirituality. And it's a very interesting text. There's a lot about it that is potentially challenging to the way that we in the West particularly sort of conceive of and think about God and the universe and our connection and place within it and so forth. And so it's a great text to read through, and it's a very easy read as well. The section that I want to highlight today is one that I believe I maybe referenced in a blog post at some point. And it just really speaks to so much about the things that I emphasize, the things that Rumi talks about, and is a message that we cannot hear enough. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. So as a little bit of context, the book is a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. And Arjuna is a man, not a normal man, but a man of the same origins as you and I. And he is on the field of battle before this great battle is going to take place between himself and an army led by some of his relatives, actually. And so he's really struggling with the position that he finds himself in. So this is deep into the conversation, but I want to highlight it here. So Arjuna asks Krishna to basically explain himself, define himself, and in doing so, enumerate his many powers, his influence, his greatness. Okay, and this is Krishna's reply, and I think it's really interesting. So, Krishna says, "All right, Arjuna, I will tell you of my divine powers. I will mention only the most glorious, for there is no end to them." So I will mention only the most glorious, for there is no end to them. And the first one that he enumerates here is, "I am the true self in the heart of every creature." He goes on to list many other great influences and powers that he has that act through man and act through the natural world and so forth. And then at the very end, after enumerating all of these many things, "I am the gambling of the gambler and the radiance in all that shines," right? This juxtaposition there. "I am effort, I am victory, and I am the goodness of the virtuous." So it goes on listing all of these things. And then at the very end he says, "But of what use is it to you to know all this, Arjuna? Just remember that I am, and that I support the entire cosmos with only a fragment of my being." I am, and I support the entire cosmos with only a fragment of my being. So, why did I take the time to move away from Rumi today and talk about this? If you've been following me at all, you know that this last part is very near and dear to my heart. What good is the knowing? What good is understanding what God does and being able to list his many powers, his influence over life? What good is it really for us to have an intellectual understanding of our place within the universe, or even the ways in which God is acting in our lives? What use is it? Something to consider. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here, and is relevant to this conversation, but also goes beyond it in some ways, is that Krishna, in giving his reply, says, "I will enumerate my divine powers, but I'm only going to mention the most glorious. The most glorious." And what is the very first thing that he says? And I love this. "I am the true self in the heart of every creature." Right? And the self here is capitalized. So your true self, in other words, is God. It's Krishna in this case. I am the true self in the heart of every creature. We are divine, right? So if our true self is actually this divine love, this immeasurable power, who among animals is the lion, among birds, the eagle, among purifying forces, the wind, among warriors, Rama, of water creatures, I am the crocodile, and of rivers, I am the Ganges. I'm the beginning, middle, and the end of creation, but he's also your true self, right? And that was the first thing that he says. And so if we can't find a path to start to acknowledge our divinity and at a more basic level, just to love ourselves, we're going to have a hard time, a really hard time, being able to trust the divine in our lives without perhaps, a note every morning in our mailbox from God telling us how he's going to affect our lives that particular day, right? How are we going to just trust that it's all divine and that it's all unfolding for our best interests? How are we going to surrender to God if we can't first start to love ourselves and acknowledge our own internal divinity? And I think that if we can take nothing else away from mysticism, from any of the spiritual teachings, from Rumi, from the Bible, from the Bhagavad Gita, whatever text you might be reading at this time, nothing else, we should be taking away this message of self-love as a path closer to God, closer to the divine. Because, as Krishna says here, our true self with a capital S, is him, it's Krishna. So we have a lot of power in ourselves and a lot to say about what goes on in our lives, but it, of course, as always, involves this counterintuitive inwardness to affect the outward, this counterintuitive self-love to better love others, this counterintuitive letting go in order to be able to tap into our true nature and our true power. So I hope you got something out of this today, a little bit different. I just felt called to do this morning. So much love and take care.